Good morning, everyone. This is the continuation of our college information series. We are working through holistic admission, and today we are talking about the University of California's 13 factors. If you're watching this at home, glad you could be here. We're going to do a Q&A at the end. I'm sorry you can't make it. Show up, it's fun. But I'm glad you can watch on YouTube anyway. I really like the University of California because they're transparent, because they actually tell you what they're looking for, because they give so much information. And I think when you look at the University of California and you look at their requirements, you can really generalize them way beyond just the UCs. So when we talk about the University of California, we're talking about the well-known UCLA and Berkeley and UC Irvine and Riverside and San Diego. So we're talking about the 9 campuses in our UC system, but really you can take this information and really utilize it across the board. Okay, so the number one thing that want to make really clear is that the UC system and the CSU system, that's the Cal State system, they do not use the SAT or ACT. You could try to sneak that score in there through a PIQ, that's the little essay, they're not going to look at it. They don't care if it's perfect or not. It's just not a factor in admission. So this was due to a lawsuit. This is beyond anyone's control. So basically, you don't have to worry about our public colleges in the state of California needing a test score. So there you go. Might make you happy, might make you sad, but such is life. This is a really interesting one too. There seems to be people say, you know what, maybe I should only apply to this one because they talk to each other. No, they don't. They don't talk to each other. When you apply to the University of California, it's a single application. It goes to whichever campuses you choose to send it to. They're basically given a click to this one and a click to that one, but they do not coordinate, nor do they have any idea where else you have applied or what other campus has allowed you access. So no coordination there. So when we look at the University of California, they give us 13 factors. And these are great factors to think about as you're putting together your courses, as you're putting together your application, as you're thinking about next year. And we can divide them easily into academic and non-academic factors. So we got one of our counselors here, your academics, you have the conversation with your counselor or me for the non-academics. Same thing. We all can talk about the requirements, but I really like the way that they put this information up and they really, really let you know, like right there, what you need. So let's take a look at the academic factors. So the first one is your academic GPA. When I say academic GPA, I'm actually talking about A through G courses, and that includes the F category, which is VAPA, Visual and Performing Arts. So they include that as an academic subject. So they're looking at your academic grade point average in all completed A through G courses. The number and performance beyond the minimum. So there's a minimum number of A through G requirements. The minimum math that you have to take is through Algebra 2. You have to take a minimum of 2 years of language, for example. But they look at what you do beyond what's required. And this is interesting because we get a lot of people that say, well, I've done everything I need to do. Why do I have to take another class? It is because the minimum isn't enough. The minimum is a minimum. They actually have recommended higher numbers. They also look at UC approved honors, advanced placement, and transferable college courses. They count them equally. So an honors course is a course that regular course, but it has a little more depth and complexity. You get a little H on your transcript. It's weighted higher. You get an extra point. So an A is worth 5 instead of 4, and a B is worth 4 instead of 5. Same way for advanced placement and college advanced placement. These are the courses from the College Board. They are college courses, and they have a test at the end. You do not have to take the test at the end to get that extra weighted grade for an advanced placement course. You get the weighted grade simply because you worked hard and you took an advanced class. And of course, transferable college courses. These are courses that you take at the community college that can be transferred. So for example, if you take an Algebra 2, that's typically non-transferable. You don't get that bump. But if you take college algebra, that is. So anything that is truly college level, you get that extra bump, and they actually count them. It matters that you are trying to go above the minimum. We also have something called ELC, eligibility in the local context. This is the top 9% of iLEAD students. So what's really interesting about colleges is they are not comparing you to the college down the street. They are not comparing you, excuse me, to the high school. They're not comparing you to students at Irvine High School. They're comparing you to students at iLEAD based on what you have access to, based on what you do. And they take the top 9% of our students and they are automatically eligible to attend a UC. They have guaranteed admission to a UC, not necessarily the UC of your choice, tends to be Merced, sometimes Riverside, but that also can give you a bump in admission. So top 9% of iLEAD learners. Um, this is a very important one. Senior year program, the quality of your senior year program. I often hear, you know what, I only have to take what is it? It's econ and government and English. Why do I have to take anything else? And also I want to go to Berkeley. Yeah, you're not going to Berkeley if you're only taking econ, government, and English. You need to really have the same rigor in your senior year program as you have had all along. Do not get senioritis. Do not drop below. Um, Keep that rigor up. It matters. They look at it. It's one of the factors. The next one is interesting. It's the quality of your performance relative to educational opportunities available in your high school. You're never penalized for what you don't have access to. There's actually a essay that you can choose that we'll talk about the essays later. There's an essay that you can choose where you get to talk about the educational barriers or opportunities, where you can say, you know, I was at an independent study school. I didn't have access to a large number of AP courses. I decided to take community college course. I mean, there, you could talk about the opportunities or the barriers within your academic background, and that actually is taken into account. So, did you do all that you could based on what you had access to? Then we go into performance in one or more specific subject areas. Once upon a time in the olden days when I was applying to college, it was important to be well-rounded. You wanted to do well in everything. But here, one of the things that has changed significantly, just at the UCs, but across the board, is the ability to go ahead and dive into areas of your interest, regardless of what that is. If you are really into economics, and you decide to take a lot of economics courses at the community college, or you take multiple econ AP classes, or you do special projects or anything that shows that you are outstanding in a specific area, that counts. That is one of the things that they look at. And I really like this next one, improvement in performance, both in GPA and the quality of coursework. So if you started out not as strong as you'd like to be, but you had a definite upward trend, in your grades, or maybe you took just general courses, but you decided to add more community college courses over time. Those are both upward trends and improvement in academic performance, and that counts, that matters. Now, what's really interesting about the University of California is their GPA. It is not the same as a GPA that you will see on your iLEAD transcript or the GPA that most schools, most colleges use. They only look at the grades in your A through G courses in 10th and 11th grade. And that includes the summer before 10th and the summer after 11th. So inclusive of those two summer schools. That is what makes up your UC GPA. Also, you get extra points for that 10th and 11th grade, but it's capped at 8 extra points. So if you take 15 honors classes or community college classes, the GPA is going to cap at 8 when they do the calculation. So this is a little different. It means if you kind of had some issues in ninth grade, the GPA wise, that's forgiven. And this is also true with the Cal States. It doesn't mean they're not visible. So with the UCs, making it really clear, your grades are visible to them. They have access to your transcript, but the GPA that they calculate is 10th and 11th grade, inclusive of the summers. The minimum GPA to get into a UC, you have to have a UC GPA of 3.0 or above. Most learners are far above that 3.0. Okay, So you may have been here last week when we specifically looked at our students. Not last week, I think it was a couple weeks ago. We did a case study where we had a general. Uh, we created our own college. We had general information. These are the same students from our case study, but the difference is we are looking at them through a UC lens. And notice that I have 10th and 11th grade in red. So now you can see that we have a different GPA situation. A GPA, your regular GPA is a 3.7. Red's weighted GPA is 3.8, and her UC GPA is also 3.8. That is because she does not have more than 8 credits. We're going to see in a moment what happens if you have more than 8 credits of weighted grades. And using the semesters, we count according to semester. The total A through G courses that she's taken is 40, and the total advanced courses that she's taken are 8. And these are all things that are visible to the admission officer that is doing the kind of analysis on the transcript. So this is how they're viewing Red's academics. Yes, they can still see them from ninth grade. And I want you to notice 12th grade. Notice that it says IP and PL. IP stands for in progress, and PL stands for planned. The University of California's deadline is November 30th-ish, sometimes a little after that. But there's no grades available for senior year. So they can still see what you're taking and they can see what you're expected to do, but they do not have access and they do not include those 12th grade grades. Looking back at blue, if you remember from our case study, if you weren't here for our case study, that's okay. We're still, you can still look at the slide and get an idea. So blue was our supercharged, perfect everything. And we can really see the difference between the weighted and the UC GPA. So because it caps at 8 honors credits, you can see that we only looked at that for the GPA. So he has a weighted GPA of 4.48 and a UC GPA of 4.33. Now, here's something interesting. While the University of California as a system uses a UC GPA, there are a couple of campuses that look at both your weighted and your UC GPA. They will take into account both, specifically your more selectives like Berkeley and UCLA. So yes, this student has a UC GPA of 4.33, but they also are considering the entire transcript. So this is what Blue, our superstar, looked like according to his UC lens. And we also had Green. And I just wanted to point out, because this is pretty common with iLEAD students, when you have your PEs and you have your things like tennis, notice that in 11th grade, our Green student took a tennis class or a PE class, or sometimes there are classes that are not on that A through G list. They're not counted in the GPA. So a lot of times I'll get students that have a lot of A's and things that are not A through G. That is something to realize that A is not being averaged in with the UC GPA. VAPA is Visual and Performing Arts if it is a UC designated course. So we get an idea of the GPA. We can see the weighted GPA was 4.0 and the UC GPA was 3.62. So it's slightly different. They had a total of 43 courses and 19 advanced courses. And so, yeah, sorry about tennis. Sometimes we have health. We have a few others that don't count as well. Okay. So we've kind of looked at the academic aspects of the University of California, but the University of California really, really values non-academics. So let's take a look. I want to just express that non-academics, it doesn't mean you have to cure cancer. And most of our kids here at iLEAD don't cure cancer, and we have fantastic admission rates. So as we're looking at this non-academic aspect, this is normal, everyday high school student stuff. Okay, so achievements in special projects in any academic field of study. So if the student has done a project, if they've gotten really interested in something and they've dived in and it's academic, that's one of the things you can talk about in your little personal insight question essays. It's something that goes on your extracurricular list, and it's something that matters. So once again, we kind of saw before that in that single area. So they have, I can't remember the wording that we used earlier, but excelling in a specific subject area, we can see that both in terms of coursework, but we're also seeing that now in terms of activities. So that deep dive into the things that you love, whether it be academic or non-academic, that matters. Also, special projects undertaken within the high school context. So it could be inside of high school, it could be outside of high school. People always think that extracurriculars have to be outside of learning. But one of the things that they're saying is if you're doing it within the context of school, that matters too. So if you get really involved in a project in a class, that counts too. Your special projects, it doesn't matter where you do them, inside, outside of school, you're good. One thing that you don't have control over is location of your secondary school and residence. We are located where we are. That can't be changed, but this is just one of the things they look at to make sure that they have diversity. That was one of the things mentioned in our just before we started recording. Somebody put one of the factors that they guessed might be a factor is diversity, and this is actually one of those factors. So diversity of location, it does matter that they bring in people from all up and down the state. So location matters, and that's not within your control. Okay, this is a biggie. Academic accomplishments in light of life experiences and special circumstances. And I have really seen this taken into consideration. And you can see I've got the list there. I don't need to read the whole thing, but things that students often talk about, disability, they're in a situation where they don't have access to things because of low income. Maybe they're the first in their family to attend college. In fact, first generation seems to weigh very heavily for UC Irvine. This is something that I've noticed that they tend to pride themselves on mobility and access. So first generation to attend college. Students need to work. There are educational environments that are not advantageous. There's personal situations, veteran, refugee. They really look at this and they give you a chance to talk about it. And I have seen situations where the student, they're responsible for all their siblings, for example. So maybe their extracurricular list is not super fancy because they have things that they're doing at home, and that matters. That counts. I've had students who have discussed being unable to have access to specific classes. I actually had a student who talked about this at her former high school. And she was explaining why she had no honors AP or community college until she got to iLEAD, and we allowed it. And they actually, one of the colleges actually requested more information on that from her. And she had a way to explain that even better. And so they actually looked at that and requested more. That was UCLA actually that requested more information. And so this is something that you can talk about if it has affected your academics. It's not uh, issues for issues' sake. It has to still relate to your academic accomplishments. Also, educational preparation programs. They ask about this. They actually have a long list in the extracurricular section. Cosmos is a STEM program that's part of the UCs. We have Upward Bound. There's a list that's so long, I haven't even heard of half the programs. But if you've participated in educational preparation programs, that does help as well. So there's also this I call kind of the hodgepodge of things, special talents, achievements, and awards. And this is so broad, so broad. Everything from visual and performing arts, communications, athletics, written or oral proficiency in other languages. I had a student that was very, very, very involved in culture and language. She was taking 3 different languages. She was really studying at the community college and in culture. And she actually didn't have as high level in her other courses, but she was so far advanced in that area of interest, demonstrated written and oral proficiency that she knocked it out of the park and got into every UC because she really dove into that. Special interest, which includes intensive study and exploration of other cultures. Put that together with languages and you are good to go. Experiences that demonstrate unusual promise for leadership. That could include community service or participation in student government, but it doesn't have to be official. It is things within your own personal community. Your personal community could also be your family, by the way. It doesn't have to be an organized thing to show promise for leadership. There's a place to talk about stepping up. And so what they're looking for is that you have promise for bringing your leadership to campus. And so whatever you're doing is something that shows them that you can be a leader. And then other significant experiences, achievements, and this is the line, this is the key. Your promise for contributing to the intellectual vitality of a campus. Basically, they want to see who you'll be. And the way to see who you'll be is by looking at who you were. And so kind of think about what you're doing now and how that shows them to who you might be when you arrive on campus. Okay. Now, interesting thing, when you look at the website, there are 13 factors. They're listed. If you looked at my presentation, there's 14. And this is because the website, the student-facing website, and the counselor conference actually gave two different lists. There was an extra factor. So this is a student-facing website. And you can actually go to it when we're done with the presentation. I can go and I can put the link up in the chat. And you can see that there's 13 factors, and it is exactly what I explained. And so we have these 13 factors. So when we went to the counselor conference, they added in an extra factor that they didn't tell anyone about, and that is participation in educational preparation programs. So as you're looking at the 13 factors on the website, understand that sometimes counselors are given some other information. I'm passing that information off to you. Educational preparation program doesn't necessarily have to be an official program, but there's a lot of things to participate in, especially during your summers, that get you ready for success in college. So the 13 factors, they kind of combined projects and added in educational programs. So, okay. Interesting thing that's not mentioned though. They're looking beyond just those 13 factors and what you do. I had a really interesting experience because we had an iLEAD student that I don't know if he's still at Berkeley. I think he may have graduated. I should reach out and find out. But he was given access to his application. Once you go to a campus, you can access your application and you can take a look at the rubrics that they use and the comments that were made. You can't see a letters of recommendation if you signed a waiver, but you can actually see what they put on the application. And they invited him in. They were doing some kind of a study. And he called me right away and he said, I have to tell you what they said. And what they pointed out from his personal insight questions and from his list of extracurricular activities was that he had a love for learning. He showed this love for learning. He had a demonstrated concern for others. And this really flew off the page. When I read his application, I could see these coming through. He showed originality and creativity, and he has sustained EC involvement, extracurricular involvement. And this was true for him, even though this particular student attended multiple high schools. He chased his interests regardless of what his circumstances were. And so I found that really interesting, especially this demonstrated concern for others. That's not one of the 13 factors. And this is a very Berkeley thing. They really want caring people on their campus. And so this was not something that the student thought about when they were writing their PIQs. This is something that just came out naturally. So you can't really maneuver it. Your true self will shine through in your words. Now, we have a weird thing between the UC and the CSU GPAs. And I discovered this accidentally as students were starting to put their things into the application. And I went and researched it more. And I thought, oh, this is really weird. So CSUs do it differently. They have a multi-factor admission approach. And what that means is they look at at numerous things. They, first of all, use a score. They're not holistic. So those 13 factors, they're only looking at the academic aspects of them. And they're doing it through a computer. So basically, they're taking the classes you took, they're chugging them away in a calculator, and they're spitting out a number. So that's how they do it. Yeah, you know what? They ask you how many hours a week do you do an extracurricular activity, and you put a number in there. How many hours a week do you work? You put a number in there. I mean, that's it. That's as far as your extracurriculars get. So they're using your GPA. And the calculation that they use really varies by campus. With my class, we were working on the index score at Cal Poly Pomona, and it is your UC GPA times 1,000 plus 450. That's the calculation that they use. We're looking at Cal State Long Beach, and the calculation is different. So it's all using the UC GPA, but what they consider important, whether they weigh something heavier than another thing, if you're looking at like a STEM field, science, STEM, science, technology, engineering, mathematics, they may actually recalculate that and give a higher weight to your math and science courses. So every campus does it completely differently. Some are transparent, some are not. But that's how they do it. But there's a weird thing, and that is for students that take community college classes, the CSUs count those twice, and the UCs do not. So, for example, when we're looking at the student Green, remember Green had a lot of community college courses. His UC and his CSU GPAs are different because we double counted the community college courses. And this is an interesting thing because it really kind of we have a lot of students taking community college. And maybe if you look at it in an equal way, when you have a student doing AP calculus, they're doing 2 semesters of it. When you have a student doing community college calculus, they're doing 1 semester of it. So they're counting it as two. The community college is the equivalence of a high school year-long class. It's just the differences in how the UC and the CSU do the calculation. So that's weird and interesting. So showing you the Cal Poly Pomona multi-factor admission, there is the actual calculation. The index score is the A through G GPA times 1,000 plus 450. Made all my students do this. And you can see the difference in our students. We know their UC or their CSU GPAs. So let's take a look. So did they get into Cal Poly Pomona? We looked at their UC GPA. We multiplied it by 1,000. We added 450. And now instead of looking at the GPA, we're looking at an index score. You know what? Let's do it. We know that Red is 4,350 and she was interested in engineering. So I love Cal Poly Pomona. This is their website. If you're interested, I'm going to just put it in the chat. If you're here with me today, I'm going to just put this in the chat. You can peruse it with me. If we remember what we had Red was 4,340 and she was interested in engineering. Let's see how she did. What Cal Poly Pomona does, and I think they're the only college that does it, and I love them for it, is they tell you last year's minimum scores. So let's take a look at the College of Engineering and see if Red would have gotten in. Do we say that was 4,350? So we can see that in some of them, she would have been accepted to Cal Poly Pomona because her index score was high enough, and in others, she may not have been. Now, Cal Poly Pomona does say they sometimes recalculate for STEM, but they're not transparent with that. But this is a pretty good way of looking at it. So she was, I've already forgotten, 40, I'm so old and forget, 4,340. So let's see what she would have gotten into. So she would not have gotten into electrical engineering. She would not have gotten into aerospace engineering. She wouldn't have gotten into civil engineering at Cal Poly Pomona. She would have gotten into computer engineering. And then you can see the 2,950 is the minimum. That is a 2.5 GPA. Local, some colleges will focus on their local community and have different requirements. You can see that the requirements are all the same here for Cal Poly Pomona. We can compare that to Blue. Now, Blue, who was our superstar, was a 4,780. Let's take a look at Cal Poly Pomona. And if Blue was interested in engineering, they got into everything. So, in the case of a student that is really, really academic, the CSUs are it's a much easier way to kind of walk in. We can look at some other areas. And the one that I find interesting is this whole psychology thing. So most at Cal Poly Pomona, most of your humanities types of courses are you only need the minimum 2.5 requirement to get into a CSU, but psychology is impacted. That means that there are more students than there are spaces. And anytime you have an impacted major, you have a higher index score. Red would get into psychology. And so that gives you an idea of just different, how to look at a CSU compared to a UC. So CSU is just a straight score. UC, they're looking at more than the score. Okay. So just to show you, this is an example of Cal State Long Beach. Um, the academic index is your college preparatory. That's what they call it. That's your UC GPA. Or your CSU GPA, your A through G GPA, times 200 plus 500 times math and 500 times English. They're all different. They all do it differently. And if you're going into STEM, you got your GPA, but it's math and science subjects. So you can see that how each college is doing it is very different. Um, some of them are an absolute mystery, and others kind of give you a better idea of how that would work. And basically, there's a cutoff score. If you're above it, depending on how many people apply, you're in, and if you're not, then you're not. Okay, so some stuff coming up. One thing I don't have on here is there is a Pomona College tour. Counselor Bethany was like, "Did you announce the Pomona tour?" And I thought, I forgot. There is a Pomona tour. I think it is on March 6th. We're going up to not Cal Poly Pomona, Pomona College. Come and meet us there. It's a great small liberal arts college. We are giving the SAT on March 13th in Costa Mesa. I'll put the link up in the chat when we're done with the presentation. And there's a college fair. The National Association of College Admission Counselors, they're a absolutely 100% legit organization. Their college fairs have everyone goes to them. There's one coming on February 10th. I think that is Tuesday, here in Los Angeles. It's in Pomona. We're doing a lot of Pomonas today. So that's coming up, and we got some future sessions. We got holistic admissions, we got extracurriculars, we've got understanding fit, we got building a list, and then we have transfers, and then we have gotten to the end of the year. See, I'm already tired just looking at all the presentations I'm about to give. Okay, so that was our whirlwind tour of the UCs and admissions, holistic admissions, looking through that lens, and our CSUs. If you're watching from home, I thank you for your time. Come join us live. It's a lot more fun because we do a Q&A after. And I'm going to stop our recording. So bye at home.